Hi, my name is Sarah from jacksonsjob.com, and today I'm going to share with you how to make orange spice cake. This is a very nice citrus cake with the warmth of cinnamon and allspice. This is a very forgiving and simple recipe. Let's get started by preheating our oven to 350 or 180 degrees Celsius. You'll find full written recipe and nutrition information in the link below. You start out this recipe by zesting one orange. If you do not have an orange, you can use 2.5 milliliters or 1/2 teaspoon of orange extract, but I do recommend going out and getting an orange. It's so much more flavorful. In addition, you can also use the extract and the orange zest. This will make a very flavorful cake on the times that the oranges aren't in season. Set the orange zest aside by putting it in with the eggs. The next thing you want to do is cut open and juice the orange. You will get about 1/4 of a cup or 80 milliliters of juice. Now, if you're doing this by hand, I will warn you, this is a little bit labor intensive, so if you have any arthritis or any kind of joint issues, you may want to go out and invest in a juicer or get someone to do it for you. If you do not have an orange, you can use orange juice. You just got to make sure you use the kind without any added sugar. Set that aside and start out with 1.5 cups of flour or 225 grams. To that, we're going to add in 1 teaspoon or 4 grams of cinnamon, 1/2 teaspoon or 2 grams of allspice, 1/2 teaspoon of salt, which is 2 grams, and finally 1.5 teaspoons of baking powder or 6 grams. If you'd noticed, I'd gotten the salt out of the cabinet and had to brush it off my hand. If you're not careful, you'll forget ingredients if you don't lay them out all in place. I highly recommend before you start a recipe to double check what you're doing. Fortunately, I've made this thing hundreds of times and I just remembered that I needed salt at the last minute. You need salt in recipes with sugar. It helps balance out the flavor. Now you just mix up all the dry ingredients until it's well combined. This will ensure that you get spice all throughout the cake. Once you do that, set that aside and let's break up these eggs. You're going to scramble them as if you were making eggs for breakfast. Don't take a lot of time here. You don't really need to. This is kind of an all-in-one type of a cake, and it relies on the leavener to raise it, not so much beating air into the eggs. I think that's what I like about these oil-based cakes. They're very forgiving as long as you have fresh leavener. So if you have went into your cabinet and you got baking powder out that's like 3 years old, do yourself a favor and go get you some baking powder that's fresh. To the 4 eggs or 200 grams, I'm adding in 3/4 of a cup or 180 milliliters of oil. You can use any oil of your choice. If you use a olive oil, try to stick with the lighter one, or you'll have a peppery undertone, which actually could be really good with this spice cake. To this, I'm adding in 3/4 of a cup or 150 grams of plain white sugar. You can use brown sugar in place of the white sugar. It gives it a really nice molasses flavor undertone to it. It's really up to you. I really like these types of cakes because they are so highly customizable. Now you just start in adding the dry ingredients to the wet. I do it about 1/3 to 1/4 of the time, so that way I don't get any lumps. Now ideally you would use a sifter, but again I'm showing this for the everyday baker. So by doing it in little small increments, you're ensured not to get lumps. You may make a mess if you don't have a big enough bowl. I recommend using at least a 3-quart bowl or a 2.5 liter. This one is just way too small for this recipe. Finally, once you get this all mixed together, you want to switch over to a spatula for 2 reasons. It'll help ensure that you got any flour that was stuck on the sides mixed into the batter, and it also will help you easily pour it into your tin. What I like to do is use parchment paper in a 9x5 or a 23 by 13 centimeter pan and line it and have like a little sling. This makes it easy to lift out later when you put the drizzle over top of it. However, if you do not have parchment paper, you can grease and flour the pan. Both will work. The parchment paper just makes it easier to remove. As you can see, this is now lump-free and drips easily off the spoon. It's a very thin batter similar to cake box mix. I really like it as it is a very easy recipe to start out with when you're learning how to make cakes. And it also levels very nicely into the pan. You'll want to make sure that the parchment paper, if you're using it, doesn't slide down into the cake batter. That can sometimes happen when you're pouring this in too quickly. So just take your time. This is a very nice recipe for self-leveling. You don't have to do anything extra, just pour it in and it will do all the work for you. What I like to do though is sometimes tap it lightly on the counter after I'm done so that any air pockets will settle out. You don't have to do this, and if you do have any air pockets when you cut into the cake, it just shows it's homemade. So I'll leave that step up to you. You'll want to bake this anywhere from 45 to 55 minutes or until a toothpick inserted comes out clean. Once that is done, take it out of the oven and let it sit on a cooling rack. While it's sitting, get out your orange juice that you made earlier and add in 1/2 a cup or 62 grams of powdered sugar. You'll want to stir this together and get a nice thin layer. This is going to go on top of your cake in the form of a drizzle. Now if you are a boozy person, you could add in a couple tablespoons of bourbon and give it a really nice kick. Next thing you'll want to do is get a skewer or something to poke holes in the cake with. You'll want to do an even layer all around, about 12 holes or more. The more holes you put in, the more of the juice will get inside the middle of the cake. The less holes you do, the less will get in. It's best if you do this while the cake is still warm because it will absorb the most liquid. Now if you've already cooled the cake, that's okay too. Just continue to poke holes. Now what we'll do is just slowly start drizzling the orange juice and sugar mixture over top of the cake. Some of it will fall to the side, but don't worry. You're going to leave this in the pan for at least 5 to 10 minutes or until it has absorbed most of the liquid. Once it has absorbed most of the liquid, you'll remove it from the pan and let it continue cooling on a rack. If there's any of the juice left inside the pan, you can take it and pour it over top yet again. You'll see in just a moment what I'm talking about. Finally, you'll want to get something to catch the juice when you take the cake out of the pan. This just helps with easier cleanup. I used to use wax paper or parchment paper, but then I learned I could use just a plain old baking sheet and save some money. It's much easier to do, but you do have to clean up a little bit afterwards. But I think that's good for you to do some cleaning as opposed to just wasting paper randomly. Now as you saw, the parchment paper sling made it so easy to lift the cake out. If I wouldn't have done that, I would have had to get sticky residue all over my fingers. This makes it a minimal mess and is very easy. Now because I think that the drizzle is just amazing, I use whatever is left in the pan and I just put it right over top of the cake. This ensures I get as much as possible on top of the cake. You'll have two options at this point once you're finished. You can serve it as is and show the holes, which makes people know that it's a drizzle cake. Or if you're showing it for someone that you want to have a nice presentation, you can get out some powdered sugar and a little bit of allspice or cinnamon and put it in a sifter and just lightly dust the top. This will hide the holes and give it a nice little definition. I like it both ways personally. If you like this recipe, please go to jacksonsjob.com for more and be sure to subscribe. Thank you for watching and have a great day.